In this interview, Mehdi Hasan speaks with lawyer and author Omer Aziz about whether the United States is moving towards a more authoritarian political future. We will examine four key parts of their discussion: the warning signs, why some young men are drawn to the far right, America's own history with fascist movements, and what a credible democratic response should look like.
You write in the book, quote, "By the time the fascists are building the camps, it's already too late and we have lost." When you look around the US right now, ICE is buying up commercial warehouses, transforming them into immigrant detention centers en masse. We've seen a record number of people die in ICE custody since Trump took office in January 2025. How close are we to what you write about in the book, where it's already too late and we've already lost?
I think we are on the precipice of that decision, whether it goes completely to the far right and we lose American democracy for good. It would be ironic in its 250th year anniversary, or whether we can reclaim this project. And I just also want to make one point, because we've talked about Republicans and conservatives. Liberals and Democrats played a huge role in the paving of Trump, the erosion of democracy, and the rise of fascism.
That warning should be taken seriously, but not accepted uncritically. The evidence supports a major expansion of immigration detention. ICE pursued a nationwide warehouse acquisition program, while 31 people died in its custody during 2025, the highest annual total in 2 decades. The progressive concern is that mass detention, weakened oversight, and the treatment of migrants as a permanent internal threat can normalize authoritarian state power. The conservative response is that governments have a lawful duty to enforce immigration rules and remove people without legal status. That principle is legitimate, but enforcement does not authorize inhumane conditions, arbitrary detention, or avoidable deaths. Aziz's claim that American democracy could be lost for good is a warning and an inference, not a proven fact. Nor should immigration detention centers be casually equated with Nazi extermination camps. But the underlying test is valid. Democracy is endangered when executive power expands faster than accountability. HHN 365's verdict is clear. It is not proven that America has already crossed into fascism. But when detention expands, deaths rise, and political fear weakens scrutiny, complacency becomes morally indefensible.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I did observe was that many young men of color were moving to the far right as well, whether it's South Asian or Latino and others. And I think the reason why that's happening is because neoliberal economic policy has failed young people in particular, whether that's the financial crisis, whether that is the enormous amounts of greed, outsourcing of industries. And then, of course, the wars on terror in Iraq and Afghanistan. We sent thousands of people overseas. We killed over 1 million people. We hollowed out our own communities and neighborhoods. And so when you have nothing to live for, it becomes very easy to drift to far-right supremacists and white supremacists. There's an analogy here to young men who would join ISIS, for example, 10 years ago. Again, when you don't have something within your community, within your body politic that supports and uplifts you, it becomes a lot more tempting.
Aziz identifies a real problem. Economic insecurity, weakened communities, and the loss of purpose can make extremist politics more attractive. The progressive reading is that decades of inequality, outsourcing, and failed economic policy have left many young people feeling abandoned. The conservative reading is that cultural fragmentation, weakened families, and the collapse of shared institutions have also created a vacuum of identity and belonging. Both contain part of the truth, but hardship does not automatically produce extremism, and it never excuses racism, misogyny, or scapegoating. Grievances can explain why a message becomes attractive. They do not make that message morally defensible. Aziz's wider argument is stronger than some of his specific claims. His figure that the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan killed over 1 million people depends heavily on which deaths, countries, and methodologies are included, so it should not be presented as an uncontested fact. HHN 365's verdict is this: the far right succeeds when it turns genuine pain into manufactured enemies. The answer is not to dismiss young men, nor to excuse hatred. It is to offer dignity, opportunity, community, and a political purpose that does not require someone else to be dehumanized.
People have fallen through the cracks.
Yeah.
What do we believe in anymore? Just consumerism and scrolling all day? Well, if that is the only thing that's on offer, then what the far right offers, which is meaning and purpose and community, that will always be more alluring, because human beings are not just economic actors.
Yes.
So I think this is something I would counsel both left and right, is that we need to give people purpose. We need to uplift all of us rather than just some of us and pitting people against each other. And that's going to come down to not just politicians, but educators, teachers, journalists, citizens, the most important office. And I think that's where it's going to begin. And if we get that right, we can build this movement and push back against fascists. But also remember, we have to build an affirmative political and economic project. It's not enough to say you are an anti-fascist. You have to be pro-democracy for all people. And that's how we galvanize, and that's how we take America back.
Aziz is strongest here when he argues that opposition alone is not enough. The progressive reading is clear. People become vulnerable to extremist politics when inequality, isolation, and institutional failure leave them without dignity, security, or belonging. The conservative reading also contains an important truth. Societies need shared values, social cohesion, responsibility, and institutions that give people a sense of purpose. Where both sides often fail is by offering either economic management without meaning or identity and order built on exclusion. What is verified in this clip is not that deprivation automatically creates fascism. That would be too simplistic. The stronger inference is that social abandonment, humiliation, and loss of belonging create conditions extremists can exploit. Legally, people are free to hold radical political views unless they cross into threats, violence, intimidation, or unlawful discrimination. Democracy cannot defend itself by becoming authoritarian in the name of defeating authoritarianism. Morally, however, there is a deeper duty. A democratic society must offer more than consumption, resentment, and fear. It must give people a credible stake in the future. HHN 365's verdict is clear. Being anti-fascist is necessary, but it is not a political program. The stronger answer is a democracy that delivers dignity, community, accountability, and equal belonging without turning vulnerable people into enemies.
You write about the American Nazi rally at Madison Square Garden, infamously in New York in 1939. It was attended by more than 20,000 people. You also note that the Nazis ran 20 youth camps and 70 regional divisions. How much does it annoy you then when you hear Americans today, liberals, say, this isn't who we are?
Yeah, it is kind of annoying because it's ahistorical. And I think a much more confident nation and populace is able to look at its history, to learn from it, and to move forward from that. It doesn't help anyone to erase history. And by the way, the 1939 rally in Madison Square Garden is only the most well-known. There was another one in 1934. There was others in the early 1930s where neo-Nazis were packing 15, 18, 19,000 people in Madison Square Garden. And American newspaper reporters at the time in the 1920s were making the comparison between the Fascisti in Italy and the Ku Klux Klan in America, for instance. So already there were these linkages back then of the far right that Americans at the time were willing to call out.
Aziz is right about the central historical point. Organized fascism was not foreign to America. In 1939, more than 20,000 people attended a German-American Bund rally at Madison Square Garden. The organization promoted anti-Semitism, praised Hitler, and operated youth camps designed to indoctrinate children. But it is equally important to remember that thousands of Americans protested outside, and the Bund never represented most Americans, including most German Americans. The progressive reading is that racism, anti-Semitism, and authoritarian movements have deep American roots, and national myths can conceal how easily prejudice becomes organized political power. The conservative reading is that America's history should not be reduced to its extremists. Its institutions, citizens, and constitutional traditions also resisted fascism, and ultimately fought Nazi Germany. Both points are valid. History proves neither that America is inherently fascist, nor that it is naturally immune. Legally, even hateful political movements receive significant free speech protection unless they cross into threats, violence, or criminal conduct. That protection is fundamental, but legality does not make an ideology morally legitimate. HHN 365's verdict is clear, saying, "This is not who we are," is comforting but historically incomplete. Fascism has existed in America, and so has resistance to it. The real question is not whether the danger is foreign. It is which American tradition citizens choose to strengthen when that danger returns. If you value evidence over tribalism, subscribe to Hard-Hitting News 365. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.